I mean, it's unfortunate that this conversation is so often framed as a dichotomy. Either you eat meat or you don't. Either you are concerned with animals' welfare or you're not, when in fact a great surprise in the course of researching this book was finding these hidden alliances. We tend to think of farmers and, let's say, PETA activists as being on opposite ends of this conversation spectrum. It's not true. They're at the same end of the spectrum. At the opposite end is factory farming. So when I hear, this woman, this butcher talking, there's nothing she said that I have any kind of, repulsion to or even strong disagreement with. I think that the values that guide her work and the values that guide a PETA activist's work are almost identical.
It sounds like. So your campaign would be what? To get factory farming illuminated and abolished?
To get it totally abolished. I mean, it's a system that can't really be fixed. Unfortunately, we often talk about giving chickens another 2 square inches in their cages. We talk about, offering some modicum of waste treatment for, pig lagoons. But it's a system that can't be fixed because it's based on a series of lies, or at least half-truths about who we are and what animals are. One thing that I would say, though, in response to that butcher is that I agree with this perspective that there is a way of making meat that can be humane. I went to farms where farmers treat their animals better than I treat my dog. I mean, there's a difference. I don't kill my dog after a couple of years, but that's not actually the most important difference. But the thing that's absent from this conversation is the scale that we're talking about. Those kinds of meat producers are less than 1% of what's available. And if those people are going to endorse what they do, they also have to say, to present a fully honest argument, you really can't eat meat in restaurants. You really can't buy meat from supermarkets.
Jonathan Safran Foer, my guest on WNYC, his new book, Eating Animals. You mentioned your dog, George, right?
George.
Comes up frequently in the book. In fact, some listeners may remember your op-ed piece in the Times about dog parks, where you managed to throw in a quick vegetarianism pitch while writing about George running around. What role did George play in your life and in this context?
She's probably listening right now, so I should err on overstating it rather than understating it. But basically, I was somebody who didn't care for animals for most of my life. I didn't find them charming. I didn't have any desire to pet or feed them. In fact, I was afraid of them. So about 5 years ago, I was walking down the street in Park Slope with my wife, and there's this little puppy curled into the corner, into the curb rather, wearing an Adopt Me vest. And why do we like some things and not others? I have no idea, but I liked this animal. I knelt down, I pet it, we walked home. My wife grew up with dogs, always imagined having a dog, and I said, you know what? If you wanted to adopt that dog, I would probably say okay. And so she said, let's go adopt that dog, and we did. And it was not exactly love at first sight. I had to overcome my various discomforts with her. I still do. But living with an animal and recognizing not just the similarities, but the differences. I think the differences are a lot more powerful than the similarities. The bridges that can't be crossed made me think differently about what animals are and also what I am as a person. The sort of biblical concept of dominion is relevant to everybody. One doesn't have to be religious to feel the strong appeal of that.
In fact, Marie from Brooklyn wrote in to ask, is kosher meat any safer? You have an opinion about kosher meat? And safer might be the wrong question, but that's the way
Right.
she asked it.
By safer, she might just mean better. I think it's wrong to make generalizations. There are certainly kinds of kosher meat production that are better than factory farming, and there are some examples like agri-processors, which recently went out of business, but was the largest supplier of kosher meat in the world and was basically the bottom of the barrel. I mean, it was as bad as bad can be. One thing that I can say about kashrut is that the ideas that many people seem to think drive it are humility and a humane treatment of animals. If we're going to do this thing, it's a sort of compromise that was made. If we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it by certain rules that allow us to be humans in the way we want to be. And that has been almost entirely sucked out of the practice. Now there's a growing, burgeoning movement, very local, comes out of New York, in fact, of creating a kind of kosher meat that is more in line with these ideas.
And you talk about how if you embrace these ideas, it's almost impossible to eat meat out anymore. But did you find something about KFC being committed to animal welfare in some way?
Well, KFC, which you might know, doesn't signify anything anymore. It's no longer Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's just KFC. They, as I say in the book,
AARP and NARAL, which
right.
don't stand for anything
Is that
anymore.
So?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I say in the book that it's entirely possible that they're the company that's responsible for more suffering than any company in the history of mankind. They order about 1 billion chickens a year. Try to get your head around that number. That's a lot of chickens.
Couldn't fit them into your Brooklyn apartment.
No, not comfortably. But they, as all of these companies do now, suggest that they're interested in animal welfare. Why do they suggest it? They suggest it because people are demanding it. Cage-free and free-range eggs are now the fastest-growing sector in the supermarket, in the food industry. So people want to know where their food's coming from, and they want to feel that it's something that would be acceptable to them if they could view it, if these distances could be bridged. And it's a total joke. I mean, it's a total joke. The people on their animal welfare board are all the legitimate folk have resigned because absolutely no movement was made in the direction of the recommendations they were giving, and now it's occupied basically by their suppliers. So they say that they're monitoring their suppliers, but it's the suppliers who are monitoring the suppliers. So, there are very few things that I would, as I said, I don't like to make generalizations here because it's complicated. One thing I would say is never eat at KFC.